I used to think tragedies only happened in movies, in some faraway place to people I didn't know. But I was wrong. My life wasn't a movie, yet it had a heartbreaking twist I would never forget. One December evening, as Christmas lights twinkled all over town, my entire world shattered, with a single phone call. My name is Ellie Carter. That year I was 11 years old, the age when people still believe in magic and fairy tales. My family lived in a small town in Oregon, where maple trees painted the streets red in autumn, and winter always came with thick layers of snow. My father, David Carter, was a veteran journalist for the local newspaper, and my mother, Rachel, was a nurse at the town hospital. They weren't wealthy, but we had a warm home, a complete family. One I never imagined would be torn apart. That night, my parents went out to celebrate a friend's wedding anniversary. I stayed home with my grandmother, a silver-haired but sprightly woman who always had a gentle smile for me. When the clock neared 10, I was curled up on the couch, my eyelids growing heavy under the blue glow of the TV screen, when the phone rang. I barely noticed it, until I heard my grandmother's sharp intake of breath from the kitchen. "No. This can't be." Her voice broke, as if someone had sucked the air out of the room. I jumped off the couch, my heart pounding, and ran to her. "Grandma! What's wrong?" She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, clutching the phone tightly. "Ellie, sweetheart, your parents, they had an accident." My whole body froze. I couldn't process the words she had just spoken. An accident? My parents? No! That wasn't possible. But the truth didn't wait for me to accept it. An hour later, my grandmother and I arrived at the hospital. The air was cold, and the sharp scent of antiseptic made my stomach churn. When the emergency room doors swung open, a doctor stepped out, his expression grave. "I'm so sorry," he said. And with those 3 words, I knew my mother was gone. All sound disappeared. I felt nothing but a hollow, icy void in my chest. My father survived, but he was never the same. His injuries left him unable to walk, and for months, I only saw him lying in a hospital bed, his eyes sunken with pain and despair. My entire world changed forever in one stormy night. And I had no idea how to keep living when half of my heart had been shattered. My father was discharged after nearly 3 months of treatment. But the man who came home was no longer the father I once knew. Before the accident, my dad was always full of energy. He could spend hours in his office, passionately typing away at the articles he loved to write. On weekends, he used to take me to the river near our house, teaching me how to skip stones across the water. He would tell me stories about his travels, the things he had witnessed throughout his career as a journalist. But now he just sat there, in his wheelchair, silently staring out the window. Our house was no longer the same. The laughter had disappeared. Dad no longer played rock music in the mornings while making coffee. And the light-hearted stories at dinner were gone. He sank into silence. Into a grief I couldn't reach. I tried my best to make everything feel normal. I woke up early to cook breakfast, helped him move around the house, pushed his wheelchair out onto the porch so he could get some fresh air. But he just remained silent. I hated that silence. One late evening, after washing the dishes, I walked into the living room and saw Dad staring at an old photo frame. A picture of the 3 of us on a trip to the beach a few years ago. "Dad?" I called softly. He looked up at me, his eyes dark and hollow. "Pelly, you don't have to do all of this. You're just a kid. I should be the one taking care of you. We're still a family, aren't we?" I stepped closer, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "You're here and I'm here. We still have each other. Isn't that enough?" Dad stared at me for a long time. And then, suddenly, he started to cry. I had never seen him cry before. My chest tightened as he buried his face in his hands, his muffled sobs filling the already empty room. I didn't know what else to do, so I just held his hand. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one trying. Dad was fighting his own battle too. The days that followed didn't suddenly become perfect. But one thing changed. Dad started talking to me more. He told me about his time in the hospital, about the fear of knowing he would never walk again. He admitted that, for a while, he had thought it would have been better if he hadn't survived the accident at all. Those words hurt, but I knew he wasn't saying them to hurt me. He said them because he wanted me to understand. And I did. Evenings became easier. We started rewatching old movies we used to love. I brought home books from the library and read to him, when he couldn't focus on the newspapers like he used to. One day, while I was doing homework at the kitchen table, Dad suddenly spoke. "You want to join a club at school?" I looked up, surprised by the unexpected question. "Huh? You used to say you were interested in the photography club." He smiled. His first real smile since coming home. "I think you should give it a try." His words made my throat tighten with emotion, not because of the club, but because I knew this was his way of telling me he wanted me to keep living my life. From that day on, I slowly started finding myself again. I signed up for the photography club at school. After classes, I spent time walking around town, taking pictures I thought Mom would have loved. When I brought some home, Dad spent hours looking at them, pointing out the best angles, analyzing the lighting as if he were writing an article about them. Maybe we had lost a part of our family, but what mattered was that we still had each other. That winter, the snow was heavier than usual. Dad and I sat by the window, watching the garden disappear beneath a thick white blanket. And for the first time in months, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: no matter how hard the road ahead would be, Dad and I would face it together. Dad was right. I needed to keep living my life. High school passed by faster than I expected. I spent most of my time studying and participating in the photography club, but I never neglected my evenings with Dad. Over time, he rediscovered his passion for writing and started working remotely as an editor for a larger newspaper in Portland. We weren't wealthy, but life was stable. And more importantly, I knew he was trying for me. When I turned 18, I received an acceptance letter from the University of Washington. It was an emotional day. I was thrilled about the opportunity, but at the same time, anxiety tightened in my chest at the thought of leaving Dad behind. "You have to go, Ellie," Dad said when he saw my hesitation. "Don't worry about me. I want you to live a life your mother would be proud of." I knew he was right, and so, that fall, I left the small town I had grown up in, and began a new chapter of my life. At university, I majored in accounting. A practical and stable choice. Life in the big city was nothing like what I had known, but I gradually adapted. I made friends in my classes, embraced the freedom of young adulthood, and slowly, the loneliness faded. It was during this time that I met Andrew Miller. Andrew was in my financial principles class, one of the tougher courses. He was tall, with tousled brown hair, and deep blue eyes that always carried a hint of amusement. I still remember the first time we talked. It was when I was struggling with a pile of papers for an assignment, and he sat next to me, chuckling lightly. "Need help? I may not be the smartest, but I'm pretty good at guessing answers." I laughed, and from that moment, something between us began. Andrew wasn't overly romantic or extravagant. He was sincere, patient, and most importantly, he never made me feel pitied when I talked about my dad or my past. The first time I told him about my family's accident, he stayed silent for a moment before saying, "I can't change what happened to you, but I can be here to listen whenever you want to talk about it." That simplicity, that quiet understanding, was what made me fall for him. We dated for 2 years before Andrew decided to introduce me to his family. At the time, I didn't think it would be a big deal. But I was wrong. Andrew's parents, Richard and Deborah Miller, did not welcome me as I had hoped. They were a well-off family, owners of a successful chain of restaurants in the city. From the moment we sat down for dinner, I felt Deborah's cold gaze on me. "Oh, Ellie, what does your father do for a living?" she asked, her tone casual, yet I could hear the scrutiny in her voice. I cleared my throat. "He used to be a journalist, but now he works as a remote editor." Deborah exchanged a glance with her husband before taking a slow sip of wine. That sounds interesting, but her tone said otherwise. Throughout dinner, she continued asking probing questions about my family. How I grew up. How my mother passed away. Whether my father was financially stable. It didn't take long for me to realize that she didn't approve of me. To her, I was a burden, someone her son shouldn't be involved with. That night, on the drive back, I finally let out a sigh. Your parents don't like me. Andrew reached for my hand, his grip firm. They'll have to accept you. Because I don't care what they think. I only care about you. His words warmed my heart, but deep down, I knew things wouldn't be that simple. Despite his family's disapproval, Andrew and I stayed together. After graduation, he started working for a large financial firm, while I became an accountant at a small tax office. Our life was simple, but happy. One autumn evening, on our 3rd anniversary, Andrew took me to a small park where we used to talk for hours during college. Under the soft glow of the streetlights, he knelt down and pulled out a delicate little ring. Ellie Carter, you are the most incredible person I've ever met. I want to spend my life making you happy. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face. I didn't need to think. Yes, I will. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I would have to face his family, their judgment, and their prejudices. But I also knew that, just like before, I wouldn't back down. I had survived loss, I had survived grief, and now I would fight for my love. I once believed that after Andrew and I got married, things with his family would eventually improve. But I was wrong. No matter how unwavering Andrew was in standing by my side, no matter how he never let me face their disdain alone, I could still feel the invisible wall they had built between me and their family. His mother, Deborah, never truly accepted me. And his sister, Olivia, was no better. Since the wedding, they rarely visited our home, and when they did, their cold, distant presence made me feel like an outsider. Still, I endured it. For Andrew? For the marriage I had chosen. But I never imagined they would go this far. A year into our marriage, Andrew and I decided to buy a small house in the suburbs of Seattle. It was a cozy 2-story home with a little backyard. A perfect place to start our new life together. To celebrate, we hosted a housewarming party and invited our friends and family. My father was the first to arrive. He had never been able to hide his pride in me, and I saw the joy in his eyes as he stepped into the house Andrew and I had worked so hard to buy. You've done so well, Ellie, he said, squeezing my hand. Your mother would be so proud. I held his hand tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. But that joy didn't last long. Just as I feared, Andrew's mother and sister arrived late. The moment they walked in, I felt their familiar scrutinizing gaze. Deborah looked around the house, her lips pressed into a thin line as she examined the furniture. Olivia stood with her arms crossed, her expression filled with mockery. It's cute, Deborah remarked, her tone making it clear that cute was just a polite way of saying mediocre. I chose to ignore it. This was my happy day, and I wouldn't let them ruin it. But they had no intention of stopping there. As the house filled with guests, I was busy chatting with friends and making sure everyone felt welcomed. Then suddenly, Olivia's voice rang out, sharp as a knife. What is he doing here? I turned around to see her glaring at my father, who had been happily talking to one of my friends. What do you mean? I frowned. Olivia smirked. I mean, wouldn't it be better if he were somewhere more suitable for his condition? I hear there's a really nice assisted living center downtown. The room fell into a heavy silence, my entire body froze. Olivia! Andrew's voice was firm. Stop it. Now. But then Deborah spoke up, her tone filled with fake concern. You know, Ellie, we all just want what's best for your father. Maybe a care facility would give him a more comfortable life. Here, you have to take care of him all on your own. Isn't that exhausting? I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. This is my home. Where my father lives is my decision. And he's not going anywhere, I said, my voice shaking with fury. Why are you reacting so dramatically? Deborah kept that same insincere, sickeningly sweet tone. We're only thinking of you, Ellie. No, you're thinking of yourself. My voice was ice cold. You never wanted me as your daughter-in-law. And now, you think you can just erase my father from my life? Deborah's expression darkened. Before she could say another word, my father gently touched my arm. Ellie, it's okay, he said quietly, though his eyes betrayed the hurt he was trying to hide. No. I wasn't going to let them trample his dignity. No, Dad. I turned to Andrew, my voice steady, unwavering. I can't keep doing this. Either you say something or I will. Andrew clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Then he turned to his mother. Mom, I think it's time for you to leave. Deborah blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Andrew, what are you saying? I'm saying you don't get to decide who is welcome in my home. This is my family, do you understand? If you can't respect my wife and my father-in-law, then you don't belong here. A long silence stretched between us. Then, with a sharp huff, Deborah spun on her heels and stormed out, Olivia trailing behind her. As the door slammed shut, I felt my entire body tremble. Andrew stepped forward, wrapping me in a gentle embrace. I'm sorry, Ellie. I should have shut them down sooner. I leaned into him, closing my eyes, trying to steady my breath. My father placed a firm hand on my shoulder. His voice was calm but resolute. You don't have to fight alone, Ellie. I will always be here. I squeezed his hand tightly. Yes, I wasn't alone. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't over. Deborah wasn't the type to back down easily. And something told me she wasn't done playing her cards yet. I always knew that life couldn't be peaceful forever. But I never imagined my worst nightmare would arrive on an otherwise ordinary day. That morning, Seattle was draped in a light drizzle. I was at my office, reviewing financial records for the firm, when my phone rang. Seeing an unfamiliar number on the screen, I hesitated for a second before picking up. Is this Ellie Miller? A deep male voice asked. I blinked. Yes, this is she. This is Officer Parker from the Tacoma Police Department. I am very sorry to inform you that your husband, Andrew Miller, was involved in a severe car accident on the I-5 highway this morning. A crushing weight wrapped around my chest. The world around me blurred and faded, leaving only his voice echoing in my mind. How is he? My voice trembled. A long silence stretched between us. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Miller, he didn't make it. The phone slipped from my hand. Everything after that became a hazy blur. I don't remember how I left my office or how I made it home. I only remember the unbearable emptiness in my chest, as if someone had ripped out a part of my soul. My father was the first to arrive. He held me tight, the same way he had when my mother died years ago. But this time, I wasn't an 11-year-old girl. I was a grown woman, and this pain, it cut deeper than anything I had ever known. In the days that followed, I had to arrange Andrew's funeral. Never in my life did I think I'd be planning a funeral for my husband at 28. Choosing a casket, deciding where to lay him to rest, organizing the memorial service. It was all too much. And then, as I had predicted, my mother-in-law showed up. But not to grieve. 3 days after Andrew's death, I received another call. This time, it was from Deborah. This is all your fault. Those were her first words. No condolences, no questions about how I was holding up. Her voice was cold, sharp, cutting straight into my heart. I gripped the phone tightly, trying to stay calm. What are you talking about? If it weren't for you, Andrew wouldn't have worked himself to exhaustion. If it weren't for you, he wouldn't have been driving so late at night just to come home to an unworthy wife, she spat. I held my breath. You have no right to say that. I have every right. My son is dead because of you. You stole him from this family, and now you want to play the victim? I froze. Her words weren't just cruel. They were meant to break me. I loved Andrew, my voice was hoarse. He chose this life. He chose me. You destroyed him, she screamed. Do you really think you deserve to plan his funeral? You have no right. I won't be attending. I refuse to acknowledge any service arranged by you. Her words hit me like a slap across the face. I clenched my fists. You can do whatever you want, but I will give Andrew the farewell he deserves, and whether you're there or not, I will say goodbye to him with all the love I have. She scoffed. Just wait, Ellie, you'll regret this. Then she hung up. I sat there, staring blankly at my phone, still gripping it tightly. The sorrow inside me twisted into a quiet, simmering rage. She could hate me. She could refuse to accept my marriage. But she could not take away my right to grieve. Andrew was my husband. And I would be the one to bring him home. On the day of Andrew's funeral, the skies over Seattle wept. I stood by his grave, clutching a bouquet of white roses in my trembling hands. Friends, colleagues, and loved ones gathered around. My father sat beside me in his wheelchair, his hand resting gently on mine, offering me what little strength he could. But his family never came. There was no sign of his mother. No sign of Olivia. They had refused to say goodbye. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. But I had no more tears left to cry. I had spent the past week drowning in grief. Now, all that remained was the emptiness, the unbearable weight of loss, and the pain I knew would follow me for the rest of my life. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, I whispered softly, I love you, Andrew, always. The rain kept falling, cold and relentless, but I stood there, unmoving. Because this was our final moment, and I wasn't ready for it to end. 4 days after Andrew's funeral, before I had even come close to finding a shred of peace, even in sleep, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. My hands trembled as I opened it. The bold, printed words cut into my eyes like a blade. Lawsuit for property ownership dispute. The plaintiff? None other than Deborah Miller. I kept reading through the calculated, ice-cold legal jargon. She was claiming that I had no rightful ownership of the home Andrew and I had bought together, that because Andrew had earned more, the property belonged to his family, not me. I didn't need to guess who had planted this idea in her head. Olivia. I clenched the papers in my hands, a quiet rage simmering beneath my grief. They hadn't even bothered to say goodbye to Andrew. And now? They wanted to take everything he had left behind for me? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. They had picked the wrong person to attack. I contacted James Whitmore, an estate attorney my father had known for years. After a short meeting, he skimmed through the documents and looked up at me, his gaze sharp. Ellie, you have nothing to worry about. If Andrew left behind a valid will, she has no case. A will? My heartbeat quickened. I don't know if he ever made one, I admitted. James leaned forward, intertwining his fingers in thought. Let me find out. If he did, we have the upper hand. If not? He hesitated before saying carefully. Then she could drag you into a very long legal battle. I nodded. No matter what, I was ready to fight. 2 days later, James called me. Ellie, I have good news. I nearly dropped my phone from the anticipation. Andrew met with an attorney 6 months ago to draft his will. He left everything to you, the house, the car, the bank accounts, it's all legally yours. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Andrew had prepared for this. So, she has no case, right? I asked, still afraid to let my guard down. James chuckled lightly. Exactly. But I doubt they'll give up that easily. I didn't need him to tell me that. And sure enough, 2 days later, Deborah and Olivia showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to find both of them standing there. Deborah with her arms crossed, her expression ice cold, and Olivia, looking annoyed, as if I were the intruder trying to take something that belonged to them. We're here to negotiate, Deborah said. I don't think there's anything to negotiate, I replied, my tone calm but firm. She narrowed her eyes. Listen, Ellie. My son was the primary earner. This house should have belonged to him. And since he's no longer here, his assets should return to his real family. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Real family? The same family that abandoned him when he chose to be with me? The same family that didn't even bother to attend his funeral? Deborah's face darkened, but before she could speak, Olivia cut in sharply. You have no right to keep all of this. You were just his wife. We're his blood. I arched a brow. Oh? Then let me make something clear to both of you. Andrew left everything to me. He had a will. It's all legally binding. For the first time, Deborah hesitated. Olivia's eyes widened in shock. I didn't give them a chance to recover. The documents have already been submitted to the court. You're welcome to check them if you don't believe me. But I suggest you don't waste any more time. I held their gaze. Because you've already lost. A tense silence settled between us. Then, Deborah let out a slow, humorless chuckle. But there was no amusement in it. You think you've won, she said, her voice dangerously low. You may keep this house, but you've lost Andrew. And you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. Her words stabbed at me like a knife. But I didn't let it show. I haven't forgotten that, I said, my voice steady. But I also won't let you exploit him. Not even in death. And with that I shut the door in their faces. As I turned away, I felt something shift inside me. Like a heavy weight being lifted off my shoulders. They had tried to take everything from me. But they had failed. And from that moment on, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The months following Andrew's death passed in a hollow blur. I had won the lawsuit and kept the house, but that didn't ease the pain inside me. Every night, I dreamed of Andrew. His smile, his voice, the way his eyes watched over me. But when I woke up, all that remained was the cold emptiness beside me. My father was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. He didn't say much, but I knew he understood. He had lost the love of his life once too. One late afternoon as I sat on the couch, staring at Andrew's jacket still hanging by the door, my father wheeled himself beside me and spoke. Ellie, have you thought about the future? The future. The word felt so distant. I know you're hurting, he continued, his voice steady but gentle. But you can't live in this grief forever. Andrew wouldn't want that. I let out a hollow laugh. I just don't know what to do anymore. He took my hand, his touch warm, comforting. You'll find a reason to move forward. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. I didn't know then that my reason would come much sooner than I expected. It started with the nausea. At first I thought it was stress. My body still struggling to recover from the trauma of loss. But when the symptoms didn't go away, a quiet fear crept in. One morning as I was making coffee in the kitchen, the familiar scent suddenly made my stomach lurch. I barely made it to the bathroom in time, collapsing to my knees as waves of sickness crashed over me. My hands trembled. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. No. It couldn't be. A thought struck me like lightning. I counted back to the last time Andrew and I had been together, 1 month before he died. The nausea returned, but this time, it wasn't just a symptom. It was a feeling. Within 10 minutes I was out the door, heading to the nearest convenience store. I bought a pregnancy test, my heart hammering the entire way home. The 3-minute wait felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life. I wasn't even sure what answer I wanted. And then, I looked down. 2 pink lines. I exhaled sharply, sinking to the floor. I was pregnant. I sat there for what felt like hours, the test still clutched in my hand. A part of me wanted to cry. Not out of fear, but because the emotions were too much, too overwhelming. I placed a hand over my stomach. Inside me, a part of Andrew still existed. Andrew, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. I didn't know how long I cried before I found the strength to stand. When I stepped into the living room, my father was waiting, concern deep in his eyes. Ellie? I walked toward him and handed him the pregnancy test. Dad, I'm pregnant. He was silent for a long time. Then, he let out a slow breath, and a soft smile touched his lips. Andrew's child? I nodded, tears still falling. He reached out, his fingers brushing gently against my hand. This is a gift, Ellie. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe worry, fear, questions about how I would manage. But he didn't say any of that. And in that moment, I realized he was right. I wasn't alone. A part of Andrew was still here with me. And for the first time in months, I had a reason to keep going. In the days that followed, my perspective shifted. I no longer saw this house as just a place filled with painful memories. Instead, I saw a future. A home where my child would grow up. Where I would tell them stories about their father. About the incredible man they would never meet, but who would always love them. I started planning. I reorganized my finances, made lists of everything I would need. I researched what it meant to be a single mother, read parenting books, joined pregnancy forums. Every morning I placed a hand over my stomach, closed my eyes, and thought of Andrew. He would want me to be strong. And I would be. I would live, not just for myself, but for our child. I thought that after the lawsuit was over, after I had kept my home and they had walked away in defeat, I would never have to see them again. But I was wrong. One late afternoon, as I sat in the garden, watching the golden sunset stretch across the trees, a familiar car slowly pulled up in front of my house. I didn't need to look closely to know who it was. Deborah Miller. Beside her stood Olivia. They stepped out of the car, but this time, they didn't wear the smug, condescending expressions they once did. This time, they looked desperate. I took a deep breath, instinctively placing a hand over my stomach. 6 months had passed since I found out I was pregnant, and now my belly was unmistakable. I was no longer the broken, lost woman drowning in grief. I had found myself again. And I would never let them hurt me again. I had no intention of inviting them inside. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance, my gaze cold as I looked at the 2 women who had once tried to take everything from me. Deborah was the first to speak. Her voice was rougher than before, tired. Ellie, we need to talk. I don't think there's anything left to say, I replied calmly. She pressed her lips together, then let out a heavy sigh. I know what I did was wrong, but we're in a really bad situation. We've lost everything. I said nothing, just folded my arms and waited for her to continue. Deborah swallowed hard. After the lawsuit, our family's reputation was ruined. Our restaurant lost a lot of customers. Olivia lost her job. We have no money left to keep things going. A smirk tugged at my lips. And, are you expecting me to help you? Olivia, who had been silent until now, suddenly snapped. You owe us. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by her audacity. I owe you? What exactly do I owe you? Her hands clenched into fists, her eyes burning with anger. If it weren't for you, Andrew would still be. Enough. My voice wasn't loud, but it froze her in place. I turned my gaze to Deborah, looking her straight in the eye. Do you really think I would help you after everything you've done? My voice was steady, unwavering. After you tried to take everything from me? After you didn't even bother showing up to your own son's funeral? After you blamed me for his death? Deborah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Toi tip tuk, jian chin ran hon. Bak hong den chi Andrew ken ba nat. Bak hong ko mat chi toi don nanat. Va, bai gi. Ji ba ken gi up, du bani toisimo long. Deborah? Kudout? Vi ba ta run lin. Toi. Toi kong konai kak. Toi kwai nyat? Vetide lahao, kwa kwan giba dalam. A daybird where I lay. I had intended to end the conversation there. But as my hand instinctively rested on my stomach, Olivia's gaze suddenly locked onto me. Her eyes widened as she realized something she hadn't noticed before. You're pregnant? Her voice was sharp, almost accusatory. I didn't answer. But my silence was answer enough. Deborah's head snapped up, her gaze flickering to my stomach before twisting into something vile, disgust. "Oh my God," she muttered, her voice dripping with contempt. "You couldn't even wait, could you? Andrew hasn't even been gone a year, and you're already carrying someone else's child?" My breath hitched for a brief second. But instead of anger, all I felt was pure disdain. I lifted my chin, meeting their eyes with unwavering resolve. "I'm not explaining anything to you," I said, my voice calm, steady. "Because you don't deserve an explanation." But Olivia wasn't done. She shook her head, letting out a bitter laugh. "How do we even know this baby is Andrew's? For all we know, you're just using this as an excuse to—" I took a single step forward, my gaze cutting into hers. "I don't care what you think." My voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "I don't need to prove anything to either of you. This is my child, my family. And you have no place in my life anymore." I stepped back and pushed the door open wider, motioning toward their car. "Leave, and don't ever come back." Deborah and Olivia stared at me, maybe still hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't waver. Eventually they turned and walked away. I stood at the doorway, watching as their car disappeared down the road. This time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt free. I placed my hand over my stomach, feeling the quiet rhythm of the life growing inside me. "We're going to be just fine, sweetheart," I whispered. "I promise." And for the first time in a long, long time, I truly believed it.